Hi there, and welcome to today's video about percentages. We'll define what percentages are, practice some example problems with percentages, and look at some everyday situations where percentages are used. Let's get started. A percentage or percent is basically a fraction or a ratio where the denominator is 100. When we write a fraction as a percentage, we're expressing how many parts of 100 the fraction represents. In other words, a percentage indicates the quantity of something in terms of 100. The word percent essentially means per 100. Percentages are extremely useful in mathematical calculations and for finding and comparing ratios. The symbol for percentage looks like this. Percentages are very closely related to fractions and decimals, and we can easily switch between them. Consider a grid of 100 squares. If we color 2 squares of this grid, we can write the colored region as 2 over 100. This fraction means that 2 squares out of 100 are colored. Since the denominator here is 100, we can say that 2% of the squares are colored. Let's take a look at some other percentages. In each of these grids, the number before the percentage symbol indicates the number of squares shaded out of a total of 100 squares. To show 0%, no squares would be shaded. Two other important percentages are 50% and 100%. The total number of squares is 100, and half the number of squares is 50. So, 50% means that half the total number of squares is shaded. Similarly, 100% means all of the squares are shaded. Each of these percentages can be expressed as fractions. To convert a percentage into a fraction, we write it as that number divided by 100. For example, 10% can be written as 10 over 100. Next, to convert this to a decimal, we need to perform long division of the numerator by the denominator. So we divide 10 by 100 to get 0.1. This gives us 3 different representations of the same number. 10% is the percentage, 10 over 100 is the fraction, and 0.1 is the decimal. Here's how we would write some of the percentages we looked at earlier as fractions and decimals. The fractions from each percentage may or may not be able to be simplified. Let's practice by simplifying the fractions here. If we look at the fraction 10 over 100, we see that it can be simplified because the numerator and denominator have a greatest common factor of 10. Dividing both the numerator and denominator by 10 gives us the fraction 1 over 10. On the other hand, the fraction 41 over 100 cannot be simplified further because 41 and 100 do not have any factors in common. Now, let's practice converting between fractions, decimals, and percentages with a few examples. To convert a percentage to a fraction, start by writing a fraction where the number before the percent sign is the numerator and 100 is the denominator. Then, try to simplify this fraction if possible. Let's use 80% as an example. To change it to a fraction, we start by writing it as 80 over 100. This fraction can be simplified because 80 and 100 have a greatest common factor of 20. Dividing 80 and 100 by 20 gives us 4 over 5, which is the most we can simplify this fraction. Look at another example, 113%. To start, we can change this to a fraction, 113 over 100. Can this be simplified further? No, but we can go ahead and change it to a mixed fraction, which is 1 and 13 hundredths. So, 113% as a fraction is 1 and 13 hundredths. Let's try working the opposite way. To convert a fraction into a percentage, there are a few more steps to follow. First, divide the numerator by the denominator using long division. This will give us a decimal number. Next, multiply the decimal number by 100 to find the corresponding percentage. Take the fraction 5 over 8. To convert this fraction to a percentage, first divide the numerator, 5, by the denominator, 8. This gives us 0.625, which is the decimal form of this fraction. Now that we have a decimal form, simply multiply it by 100. 0.625 times 100 is 62.5%. Great work! Let's try a mixed fraction now. 1 and 23/25. Finding the percentage of a mixed number takes a couple extra steps. To start, we need to convert the mixed number to an improper fraction. 1 and 23/25 as an improper fraction is 48 over 25. Now, we can continue with the other steps. First, divide 48 by 25 to find the decimal number, which is 1.92. Then, multiply it by 100, which gives us 192. So, 1 and 23/25 is the same as 192%. Now, let's find out how to convert decimals to percentages and percentages to decimals. Here's a trick that will help us in the next couple of examples. When multiplying or dividing a decimal by 100, simply move the decimal point 2 places to the right when multiplying, or 2 places to the left when dividing. The decimal moves to the right when multiplying because the number is becoming larger. It moves to the left when dividing because the number is becoming smaller. This works for any multiple of 10. As we can see in these examples, just move the decimal point to the same number of places as there are zeros in the multiple of 10 we are using. To multiply 10, move the decimal point 1 place to the right. To divide by 1,000, move the decimal point 3 places to the left. Take a moment to pause the video and look at the examples. Notice how many places the decimal moves and in what direction. To convert a decimal to a percentage, all we need to do is multiply the decimal by 100. Let's look at an example. Take a look at the number 1.26. To change this to a percentage, we need to multiply it by 100. Thanks to our trick, we can do this by simply moving the decimal place 2 places to the right. 1.26 times 100 is 126. And so the percentage form of 1.26 is 126. Now, try to write 0.354 as a percent. Multiply 0.354 with 100 by moving the decimal point 2 places to the right. Doing that, 0.354 becomes 35.4. So the corresponding percentage is 35.4%. To convert a percentage to a decimal, we divide the percentage by 100 instead. Let's see a couple of examples. Consider the percentage 83%. To divide 83 by 100, move the decimal point 2 places to the left. This gives us the decimal form of 83% as 0.83. Let's try to convert 240% to a decimal. This number is larger than 100%, but that's okay. It can still be converted to a decimal using the same steps. Divide the 240 by 100 by moving the decimal point 2 places to the left. This tells us that 2.40 is the decimal form of 240%. When converting a fraction to a decimal, all we need to do is divide the numerator by the denominator using long division. For example, to convert 3 over 4 to a decimal, divide the 3 by 4. Doing this would give us the decimal number 0.75. So 3 over 4 as a decimal is 0.75. If you come across a fraction where the long division keeps continuing and you are unable to get a remainder of 0, we can stop the division after 2 or 3 decimal places. The number which is repeating is denoted with a bar on top. We call this a repeating number. For example, to convert 5/6 into a decimal number, divide 5 by 6. The first number after the decimal point is 8. But as we continue dividing, we see that 3 keeps repeating. We can stop the division after 2 decimal places, and instead of writing the 3 multiple times, we can write 3 with a bar on top. So 5/6 as a decimal is 0.83, repeating. Converting a decimal to a fraction takes a bit longer, but is easy to do following these steps. First, start by writing the decimal as a fraction, with the decimal number as the numerator and the denominator as 1. Next, multiply both parts by a multiple of 10 for each number of places after the decimal point. So, if a decimal number has 1 decimal place, multiply the numerator and denominator by 10. If it has 2 decimal places, multiply by 100. For 3 places, it should be multiplied by 1,000, and so on. Doing this will give us a fraction. Then, try to simplify the fraction if possible, using the greatest common factor of the numerator and denominator. After simplifying, write the fraction as it is if the numerator is smaller than the denominator, or convert it to a mixed fraction if the numerator is larger than the denominator. To practice, let's look at the number 0.37. We start by writing the decimal number over 1, and the fraction we get at this step is 0.37 over 1. Next, multiply the fraction by 100, because 0.37 has 2 numbers after the decimal point. The resulting fraction is 37 over 100. This fraction cannot be simplified further because 37 and 100 do not have any common factors. So, 0.37 as a fraction is 37 over 100. Now pause to convert the decimal number 1.762. First, write this as a fraction with the denominator as 1. This would be 1.762 over 1. Now, 1.762 has 3 numbers after the decimal point, so we should multiply our fraction by 1,000. The new fraction is 1,762 over 1,000. This fraction can be simplified because 1,762 and 1,000 have 2 as their greatest common factor. After dividing both numbers by 2, we're left with 881 over 500. Finally, change it to a mixed fraction by subtracting 881 by 500. The resulting mixed fraction is 1 and 381 500ths. Now that we can convert between fractions, decimals, and percentages, let's talk about percentage change. When the quantity of something changes over time, we can measure that change as a percentage. We can find the percentage change of a quantity if we know the amount we started with and the amount we ended with. The percentage change could represent an increase or a decrease. If the final value is greater than the value we started with, we've observed a percentage increase. If the final value is less than the value we started with, we've observed a percentage decrease. For example, a percentage increase of 5% over 1 year means that if the original value was divided into 100 equal parts, after 1 year, that value has increased by 5 parts. In the same manner, a percentage decrease of 6% over 1 year means that if the original value was divided into 100 equal parts, then after a year, the total value decreased by 6 parts. Percentage increases and decreases can be used in math and science, and also in various walks of life. They are used to calculate inflation rates or the interest rate at a bank. When we go shopping, sales on products indicate a percentage decrease on the original cost. In chemistry, percentage increase in the mass of a chemical compound can be calculated, and we can determine the percentage decay of the mass of a radioactive substance over a period of time. In elections, the percentage of people preferring one candidate over the other is useful to check if one candidate is significantly more popular than another. For studying statistical data, the percentage increase is a very common way of measuring growth. Let's take a look at some ways in which we can solve various types of problems using percentages. A little while ago, we went over the methods to switch between decimals, fractions, and percentages. We are now going to go over some formulas to find percentages, with an emphasis on the increase and decrease of some quantity and percentage changes. The easiest way to express a fraction or ratio as a percentage is A over B equals P times 100. In any fraction or ratio, the denominator represents the total value of a quantity, and the numerator represents a part of the total. Like we learned earlier, a percentage expresses a fraction in terms of a total value of 100. If A and B are the numbers involved and P is the percentage, there are three basic types of percentage calculations involved. 1. Finding the percentage of a number. If A is any number given to us and we need to find P percent of A, which is B, then the formula is P percent of A equals B. When we say percent of A, that means we need to do multiplication. Let's try to find 10% of 500. In that case, P percent equals 10%. A equals 500, and B is the unknown that we are going to solve for. Plugging in A and P in the formula gives us 10% of 500 equals B. Now, 10% is equal to 10 over 100, or 0.1, and the word of means we are going to multiply. So, 10% of 500 means 0.1 times 500, which is 50. So, B equals 50. 10% of 500 is actually 50. 2. Finding what percent of A is B. For any two numbers represented by A and B, if we need to find out what percentage A is of B, then the formula for that is A over B equals P percent. Let's try to find out what percentage 120 is of 300. In this case, A equals 120, B equals 300, and P, the percentage, is unknown. Plugging in A and B in the formula gives us 120 over 300 equals P percent, which is the same as writing 120 over 300 equals P over 100. Some simplification is necessary to find P. We start by converting the fraction 120 over 300 to a decimal. Dividing 120 by 300 gives us 0.4. In doing so, the equation reduces to 0.4 equals P over 100. Remember, to find the value of P on the right-hand side, we need to isolate it. We can do that by multiplying both sides of the equation by 100. This would give us 0.4 times 100 equals P over 100 times 100, which leaves us with 40 equals P. This shows us that 120 is 40% of 300. 3. Finding A when B is P percent of A. If B is known to be some percentage of A, then A can be found using the formula B over P percent equals A. For example, let's try to find a value for A that will give us 48 as 40% of A. In this case, B equals 48 and P equals 40. We'll set up this problem as 48 over 40% equals A, and A is unknown. Now, change the 40% in the denominator to 40 over 100, and then convert the 40 over 100 to a decimal, which gives us 0.4. So, the fraction becomes 48 over 0.4 equals A. To complete this problem, divide 48 by 0.4, which gives us 120. So, A equals 120, and now we know that 48 is 40% of 120. The next formula deals with percentage change. If A equals the starting value, B equals the final value, then the formula for percentage increase, represented by capital P, is P equals the absolute value of the final value minus the initial value, divided by the initial value times 100. The steps for calculating percentage change are as follows. First, subtract the initial value from the final value. Next, find the absolute value of the answer you got in the first step and divide it by the initial value. Finally, multiply this result by 100. This gives us the percentage change. This formula can be used to calculate both percentage increase and decrease. Let's try an example. Mr. Roberts submitted $1,000 deposited into his bank account 3 years ago, and now it's worth $1,200. What was the percentage change in the value? In this case, the initial value is $1,000, and the final value is $1,200. Here, the final value is greater than the initial value, so we know we have a percentage increase. The difference between the two values is 1,200 minus 1,000, which equals 200. Using our formula, we can write down 200 divided by 1,000 times 100. Dividing 200 by 1,000, we get 0.2. Now, we multiply 0.2 by 100 to get 20. This is the value of the percentage change. So, there was a 20% increase in the amount of Mr. Roberts' money over 3 years. Way to go, Mr. Roberts! Let's try some practice questions. First, to a sports club. Say a sports club has 560 members, and 350 of them have a premium membership. What percentage of members have a premium membership? We know that there are 560 total members, and 350 of them have a premium membership. To convert this into a percentage, we first need to write it as a fraction. We should write this as the number of members with a premium membership over the total number of members, which is 350 over 560. According to the process we learned earlier, the next step is to convert this fraction to a decimal by dividing 350 by 560. We get the decimal 0.625. Finally, to make it a percentage, simply multiply 0.625 by 100. Remember, an easy way to do this is to move the decimal 2 places to the right. Doing this, we get 62.5. So, 62.5% of the club members have a premium membership. All that exercise made me hungry. Let's try another example. Lois ate 3/4 of her lunch. Carol ate 60% of her lunch. Who ate more of their lunch? Here, we need to compare a fraction and a percentage. To do this, we need to choose one number and convert it into the other form. Let's convert the fraction to a percentage. We know that Carol ate 60% of her lunch, which is already a percentage, so we don't need to do anything there. Lois ate 3/4 of hers. Let's find this as a percentage. Pause the video to see if you can solve this one. Let's check your work. Start by changing the 3/4 into a decimal by dividing 3 by 4. After long division, we get 0.75. Now, multiply this number by 100. Remember, to do this, just move the decimal 2 places to the right. So, 0.75 times 100 equals 75, which means Lois ate 75% of her lunch. 75% is greater than 60%. So, out of the two, Lois ate more lunch. Did you get it right? Great job this week! There was a lot to learn about percentages, but don't get too overwhelmed. Practice makes perfect, and always make sure to ask for help when you need it. Thank you so much for watching this video, and see you next time.